What if the woman begging quietly on a forgotten park bench was once the most famous face in the country? What if time stole her beauty, her fame, her fortune, but destiny was preparing a miracle no one saw coming? Stay with me until the very end, because this story will shake you, break you, and rebuild your faith in miracles. And if stories like this move your heart, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more unforgettable journeys of love, loss, and redemption. At 80 years old, Eleanor Vale sat alone on a splintered wooden bench in the far corner of Marigold Park, her back curved like a question the world had stopped trying to answer, her silver hair tangled by wind that did not care to remember her name, her thin coat failing to protect her from the biting November cold, and her trembling hands clutching a faded photograph whose edges had worn down like the memory of who she once was, because there had been a time, oh, there had been a time, when those hands signed autographs for screaming crowds, when that face illuminated giant silver screens, when her name glittered in lights taller than buildings, when strangers wept simply at the sight of her smile, and it seemed impossible, cruelly impossible, that the same world that once worshipped her would now walk past her as if she were invisible, as if the years had erased not only her beauty but her existence, and yet beneath the wrinkles, beneath the hollow cheeks and tired eyes, the faintest echo of the girl she had once been still flickered like the last ember of a dying flame. Because at 18, Eleanor Vale had not merely been famous. She had been a phenomenon, discovered by chance one summer afternoon in the small town of Ashbury where she had grown up sweeping the floors of her father's bakery, humming melodies to herself as flour dust floated like fairy magic in the sunlight, unaware that destiny had already circled her name in red ink, because that was the day a sleek black car rolled into town carrying Victor Laurent, the most powerful film producer of his era. A man whose instincts were sharper than knives and whose smile hid secrets darker than midnight, and when he stepped into that bakery and heard Eleanor singing behind the counter, he froze as if struck by lightning, staring at her not as a man sees a girl but as a king sees treasure, and within a week she was on a train bound for the glittering chaos of New York City, her suitcase packed with dreams and naive hope, her mother's tearful warnings echoing in her ears, her father's pride masking quiet fear. And by the time her first film premiered under the blinding marquees of the historic Orion Theater, the nation had fallen hopelessly in love with her, newspapers calling her the Golden Nightingale, fans camping outside studios just to glimpse her wave, her voice soft yet commanding, her presence luminous yet vulnerable, and overnight she became the symbol of youth, beauty, and possibility. But fame is a double-edged blade, and the higher it lifts you, the more devastating the fall, because what no one knew, what no screaming fan or flashing camera suspected, was that Victor Laurent did not simply discover talent. He owned it, he controlled it, he shaped it like clay, and Eleanor soon learned that the contracts she had signed were shackles disguised as opportunity, binding her to endless work, public romances scripted for publicity, interviews rehearsed word for word, smiles demanded even when her heart ached, and behind closed doors Victor's charm curdled into manipulation, his compliments laced with control, his generosity conditional, isolating her from friends, from family, from any voice that might remind her who she had been before the lights. And so at 22, at the height of her fame, Eleanor made a decision that stunned the industry. She vanished, walking away from a multi-million-dollar contract, disappearing from headlines overnight, rumors swirling like wildfire, some claiming scandal, others whispering madness, but the truth was quieter and more painful. She had chosen freedom over fortune, peace over applause, believing she could rebuild a life far from cameras, and for a while, she did, moving to a small coastal town under a different name, marrying a kind schoolteacher named Thomas Hale who loved her not as a star but as a woman, who saw her wrinkles forming as promises of years shared rather than flaws to conceal, and together they built a modest, happy life, raising a son named Daniel whose laughter became her greatest performance, whose small hands gripping hers felt more valuable than any award she had ever won, and for decades she believed she had outrun the past, that Victor Laurent's empire had moved on to younger faces, brighter stars, but darkness does not forget so easily, and when Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack on a rain-soaked evening, Eleanor's world fractured once more, and without his steady presence the old fears returned, compounded by new struggles as medical bills consumed their savings, as her son Daniel, restless and ambitious, left for the city chasing dreams of his own, promising to call, promising to return, promises that thinned with time until they were nothing but echoes in empty rooms. And then came the final blow. A letter delivered in stark legal language informing her that a lawsuit had been reopened concerning breach of contract from decades past. Victor Lawrence Corporation claiming damages so vast she could not comprehend the numbers. The court unsympathetic. The statute revived through some legal technicality orchestrated by unseen hands. And suddenly the modest house she had cherished was no longer hers. The bank accounts drained, her possessions auctioned, her identity once again reduced to paperwork and cold signatures, and at 75, Eleanor found herself alone, displaced, her son unreachable, the world indifferent, and so she drifted, pride preventing her from revealing her former name, shame convincing her that the girl who had once graced magazine covers had died long ago, and thus she became simply an elderly woman in worn shoes feeding pigeons in Marigold Park, surviving on small kindnesses and larger silences, until the day a young journalist named Clara Bennett sat beside her on that bench, initially unaware of who she was, merely drawn by the haunting melody Eleanor hummed under her breath, the very song that had launched her career 6 decades earlier, and Clara, who had grown up hearing her grandmother speak wistfully of the golden nightingale, felt a shiver of recognition, a sense that she was brushing against something extraordinary, and over the following weeks she returned, gently earning Eleanor's trust, listening to fragments of a past spoken hesitantly as though they belonged to someone else, and when Clara finally pieced together the truth, when she compared the faded photograph Eleanor carried with archival images from dusty film reels, her heart pounded with disbelief, because sitting unnoticed in that park was a legend the world thought retired in luxury or dead in obscurity, and Clara faced a choice. Publish the story and reignite a media storm, or protect the fragile dignity of the woman before her, and after nights of agonizing thought, she chose a path neither reckless nor silent, crafting an article not of scandal but of tribute, a heartfelt exploration of fame's cruelty and resilience's quiet strength, releasing it online with the headline, "The Star We Forgot," and within hours the internet erupted, old fans now, grandparents sharing memories, film historians expressing shock, social media flooding with disbelief and sorrow, and as the article spread, so did outrage at the corporation that had crushed her. Investigations reopening into Victor Lawrence's predatory contracts, testimonies from other former stars emerging like ghosts long suppressed, and what followed felt less like coincidence and more like destiny aligning its pieces, because a philanthropic foundation dedicated to supporting retired artists reached out, offering Eleanor housing, healthcare, dignity, and when Clara brought the news to her, Eleanor wept not for the money but for the validation, for the realization that she had not been erased, that somewhere beyond the noise there were hearts that still remembered, but the greatest miracle was yet to come, because one rainy afternoon, as cameras once again gathered, this time invited, respectful, a man stepped hesitantly through the crowd, his hair graying at the temples, his eyes carrying regret carved deep, and Eleanor's breath caught as she recognized her son Daniel, older now than Thomas had been when they first met, guilt trembling in his posture as he fell to his knees before her, confessing years of shame for abandoning her, for believing false rumors that she had chosen pride over family, for failing to search harder when she disappeared from his life, and in that moment, as mother and son embraced beneath the flashing lights that no longer felt blinding but warm, the narrative shifted from tragedy to redemption, because Daniel revealed that he had spent months tracing her after reading Clara's article, that he had built a modest success of his own and wanted nothing more than to bring her home, and home, she realized, was not a house or a city but the arms that held her, and so at 80 years old, Eleanor Vale stood once more before an audience, not as a glittering idol, not as a broken relic, but as a survivor whose story had outlived manipulation, loss, betrayal, and time itself, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been at 18 yet infinitely stronger, telling the world that fame fades, beauty fades, even memory fades, but kindness does not, love does not, courage does not, and as applause rose not in hysteria but in reverence, she felt a peace deeper than any ovation of her youth, because the miracle that gave her everything was not the restoration of fortune or spotlight but the restoration of connection, the reclaiming of her name, the reunion with her son, the knowledge that even after decades of silence the truth can still surface like dawn after endless night, and as she later returned to Marigold Park, this time walking steadily beside Daniel, she paused at the bench where she had once believed her story was ending, running her hand along its weathered wood with gratitude rather than sorrow, understanding that sometimes life must strip away every illusion to reveal what truly matters, and though the world would forever remember her as the golden nightingale reborn, She carried within her the quiet triumph of an old woman who had survived the storm and found, in the twilight of her years, not the fame of 18 but the fulfillment of 80, proving that miracles do not rewind time, they redeem it.